So I wanted to shoot this video because I know that there are lots of people that have shown up in my comments section who have said things to the extent of, the idea of God is ridiculous and they hate God. And I take that with a grain of salt. Of course, I believe in God and I am a Christian. I'm a devout Christian. I firmly believe what I believe. I have every intention of living that out seriously. So this is not necessarily for everybody, but if you're one of those people that just likes to get on to other people's TikToks and basically shout about how your belief system is awful and how you hate Christians and things like that. I mean, really, it is for you, but I know that you may not stick around for this video, so it might be for somebody who is actually might talk to you, to be honest, or somebody who's just curious about this. But hopefully you see it, because I haven't made it a point to jump onto everybody's posts and say you're an idiot and you're wrong because of this, and that's just not courteous, and obviously I don't think that's Christ-like. What's the reasons why I believe in God? Obviously everybody's personal faith usually comes down to an encounter with God of some sort. God becomes real somehow. They've interacted with God. Whereas if a lot of people, they haven't interacted with God, or they haven't realized that they've interacted with God, or they've ignored it, right? And I do think there's a tendency to ignore evidence for God and logic for God. For instance, if you were to go back in history and take a look at all the the 5 great arguments for the existence of God, and when you look at all those 5 great arguments, the only real rebukes to them or rebuttals to them have to do with denying logic itself. For instance, David Hume was known for coming with a lot of great retorts for the 5 great proofs for God. For example, let's say cosmological. The world universe has to have a beginning, and there has to be an instigator, somebody who started the universe. Because the universe had to have a starting point, God is the only one that could have started that, because he's infinite cause in a series of causes, right? And of course, David Hume's response was, well, why does it have to have a beginning? Why does there have to be an infinite cause? Why can't there just be an infinite number of finite causes? Well, because that doesn't make sense, David Hume. Like, it's not logical. So, but he's basically saying is like, why do we have to pay attention to logic? It doesn't matter. So you're either going to use logic or you're not. So it doesn't make any sense. Basically, there's patterns recognized in the universe, and you can watch them. You read a million books or read a million videos on how they recognize patterns. There's people that think the universe was even coded, like computer language. There's so much evidence for design. Now, some people come back and say, well, there may be evidence for design, but that's just a human necessity to recognize patterns and things. If we dismiss that, well, then it's no longer true. Well, yeah, if you dismiss logic in anything, it's no longer true. So the logic is still there. The pattern's still there. The 1 + 1 = 2 is still there. And if your only argument is that you don't have to listen to it, well, then yeah, you could disapprove anything. I mean, this doesn't matter at that point. So logically, it makes sense to believe in God. I think logically you come to a place of existentialism. Existentialism is basically the idea that you can't be sure that anything really exists, because can you trust your logic? Your logic is telling you certain things. It leads you to these certain conclusions. But existentialism basically is like, well, we're just not going to trust that. But existentialism doesn't actually lead to anything. It's just a shared mood. You can't actually prove anything with existentialism. We don't do anything with existentialism. It's like throwing a temper tantrum is what it is. Existentialism is just, I just want to defy the facts and the logic, and it's not going to help me build my life. The moment that you wake up, you assume facts and logic, and you assume that the data you're getting is correct in order for you just to interact with the world. Like, you automatically assume everything that you're getting, sight, sound, every sense, all your sense data, every piece of logic is coherent, and that it matters, and it's truthful, because you have to function, right? You're designed to function that way the moment you interact with anything. So that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be there. Some people say that God doesn't have to be practical, or God isn't practical, but all the arguments against God for being practical, believing in God, like there's a practical reason to believe in God. So we've dealt with the logical. There's a logical reason, but maybe you can say practically it doesn't make sense to believe in God, because believing in God leads to all these terrible things. And then historically you go back and you look at everything and you're like, okay, well, not necessarily, because human beings are really, really good at committing atrocities, especially when they don't believe in God, even in higher frequency than when they do, when you actually look at the data. So that doesn't do anything. And then practically you start realizing, okay, if you fit God into society, and God's teaching people revelation, and revelation is things that help us work together and actually coexist and help each other, and we collaborate, we build a better society, then God's contribution is supremely positive. If you look at maybe biblical tradition, the overall contribution of the biblical tradition has been absolutely incredible for humanity. Like all those ideas that make its way into Scripture have laid the foundation for every single modern sense of egalitarianism and the civil rights. They've laid the foundation for law and justice, and there's just the ending to genocide and slavery and blood feuds and all those things, right, come from that tradition, and the foundation for modern science and things like that. All that stuff is in there. And so practically it seems really positive. The only arguments against it are, well, we don't necessarily need God to build a society. We can have ethics and we can have right and wrong without God. And I don't know if you can. Like, I put that together and I say, if there's no God, what's the purpose? What's the point in our existence? Because what they're saying is, like, we don't need God. We can come together and we can make up our own purpose. Well, yeah, but if you can make up your own purpose, then anybody else can make it up for you too. And that's the problem. You're not alone in the universe. So anyone else can come in and just decide, in my purpose, you don't serve one. So goodbye. And then they get rid of you. Or you're subservient or oppressed in some way. So all that goes away once you have a supreme God that created everything and defined a purpose for it, right? Now all of a sudden everything has there's a practical reason to have God a part of your life and to believe in God. And then the last one that people, even if they know that, they know those two, they just get to the point where functionally they decide that they can function without God just fine in society. And then and they don't personally have to believe in God, but as long as society has a pretense of God, it's okay. And a lot of people envision like a lot of elite wealthy people are here because they feel like they don't need God. They're super wealthy, they're elite, they're on top of the world. And as long as the little people believe in God, they're not going to go off and create chaos and destroy society, and they're perfectly fine. But yeah, but the problem is that every single person in society is what creates society. It's not everybody else and then you are a part of the whole, and you help create society by what you do. And you look at the consequences of people that don't believe in that system of ethic, their influence on humanity and this whole system, and you realize there's a lot of evil things and very bad perceptions that people have because they don't believe in this, in the revelation that you see that comes from God, especially in the Judeo-Christian tradition. So where that leaves you is a logical reason to believe in God, there's a practical reason to believe in God, and a functional. And you start to realize that without believing in God, eventually, facets of society don't even function, and it's harder for you too. And so all three of those are the reasons that you can believe in God. Now, at the end of the day, like I said, it all comes down to, have you experienced God? Is God real to you? But I think that if you could just take those three into consideration, you'd realize it's not as stupid as you think it is, and you've been told it is by somebody. There's a lot of reasons to believe in God, and it has nothing to do with all of what humanity did throughout history. Humanity's fallen. It has everything to do with God's presence is trying to take humanity from a very poor starting point and bring them to a better place. Just because God exists doesn't mean God is responsible for something that is bad and tragic. What it does mean is that God is trying to take a free agent and pull them from where they started to where they ended. And if you're questioning whether or not that's valuable at all, like why would God even create free agency if it's going to lead to that? Well, what's the world without free agency? Then you don't have the possibility of higher concepts like love and sacrifice, and those can't exist without free agency or the ability to choose to be separated from God or part of God, right and wrong. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I hope that you take that well, and you take my words with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to insult anyone. I never get on here and say what an idiot you are, stuff like that. There are people that try to say some ignorant things about history, and I will come down assertively and say, no, it's this. But I will never come down and just tell you you're an idiot or not believing in God is stupid. Like that's not appropriate. That's to me, that's not what I've been taught. We speak with a gentle tongue. We speak with love. We can be assertive. You need to be assertive with truth, because if you don't, then you're doing the disservice to somebody who needs to hear it. What doesn't do any good for everybody to lightfoot into a conversation, not say what they really mean. I mean, everybody needs to be direct, and they need to say what they mean so the conversation can actually develop into something fruitful. So anyway, I hope that is good for you and that you get a lot out of it. You can comment below and you can give me your thoughts and tell me if you have a different idea. And that's okay too. Discussion is good. I love discussion. I hope you have a wonderful day.